Gentlemen of the league, it is time for the Week 4 edition of the Power Rankings. Very, very excited for this one. Possibly the most exciting week yet of the season. Several matchups that just went right down to the wire. None more apparent than the game of the century between Brennan and I. I will cover all of that in these rankings, breaking everything down as I usually do. I have a couple extra things planned for this week. Very exciting to get out there and get these power rankings going. With all that being said, you know where we are going to be starting. As usual, we start at number 14. Dumpster Team of the Week is going to come right now.
What is going on, gentlemen? It's the moment that you have been waiting for. It is the number 14 team, the Dumpster Team of the Week. It is, without question, the path of the righteous man, Pablo. Oh, my Lord. I'm going to have to drive to a goddamn landfill if you don't start scoring more points. What is going on? Why does your team suck so bad? You drafted like an absolute shithead. Only Deebo Samuel is worth anything on your team. The fact that Deebo, such a warrior, such a badass, is lumped in with your sorry lot is just a disgrace, and it saddens me tremendously. There's no more time to even spend on this team. Your team is basically bullshit, and I've got nothing more to say about it. We are moving on immediately to number 13 right now.
Gentlemen of the league, now that we have returned from that stinky pile of garbage we call the dumpster, we are now moving on to number 3, a guy who is within sniff's distance of the dumpster after 2 straight dog shit performances. We have Kareem Pie. Well, you got Kareem Pie, Cam. Another very disappointing week as we look at your scoring ranking. You are at 13th. Only Pablo has scored fewer points than your dog shit team. Let's take a look at why this might be potentially happening. Well, the most obvious answer is the first place you look. Carson Wentz at the quarterback spot. You don't have a quarterback. You made a bad plan going all in on Trey Lance with no backup, and you're paying the price. You're going to go with Trey Lance late. You got to go with a solid veteran quarterback early to solidify that quarterback spot in case the worst happens. Now that Lance is injured, broken ankle, out for the season, you are stuck with complete retreads at your quarterback spot. Carson Wentz having 2 straight disasters. You try to give him another chance. That didn't work out. Dalvin Cook's been just okay. You had a couple decent performances, but you've been having problems at flex in the last couple of weeks, basically every week since week 1. Not a lot of great things to say about your team. You have guys that are struggling all over the place, Cam. Maybe you can fix it, maybe you can't. You got a couple of freebie wins in the first 2 weeks. You are coming right back down to earth faster than Icarus after he flew too close to the sun. It's melting away, to continue to use that metaphor even more than I was already using it. Now, with all that being said, folks, we are moving on. It's number 12, and it's coming up right now. Gentlemen of the league, it is now time to analyze the number 12 team in our league, and that would be Super 8 JoJo. He is down here as one of 2 remaining 0-4 teams. His scoring ranking is 9th, so he has been scoring fairly well. Doesn't really deserve to be 0-4, but he had a very bad week this week compared to most of us, this being a pretty high-scoring week. You look at this team, you think, well, this team shouldn't be that bad. What's wrong? What is missing? And the fact of the matter is, the thing that is missing is actually 2 things. One, you have a couple of just gaping holes in your lineup. Your RB2 and flex spots are just disastrous. Tony Pollard at 1.3, Allen Robinson at 1.7. It seems like every week somebody on your team is just absolute dog shit, and that is hamstringing you. It's why you're putting up pretty solid point totals, but not enough to get you over the top. And the second thing is just bad lineup decisions. This has been kind of a theme for you this week. If you play Rashad Penny at either your flex or RB2 spot, which is the only places that you were going to play him, either one of those, you would have been out of sight against Leicester. You would have destroyed Leicester this week and gotten your first one of the season. But instead, Penny sat there racking up points on your bench. I believe that only Josh Jacobs had more points than Penny. this week at the running back spot, sitting there on your bench, that is an error that just crippled your chances of winning. The roster overall, there's still a lot of talent here, but in terms of the management and some of these gaping holes, I can't really give you too much credit here. I gave you a chance early on in the season. I was nice to you in the rankings, but your scoring rankings starting to drop. I wouldn't be surprised if you continue to lose at this point. You're kind of in a snowball region here. With all that being said, we are moving on once again. It's going to be number 11. It's going to be coming at you right now. Gentlemen of the league, moving on. Number 11 in our rankings, we have Bad Luck Bates strikes again. Sean, I didn't want to have to put you down here at number 11, but things just didn't quite go your way this week, and your team name is very, very apt. Monday Night Football is a time when so many fantasy dreams are either rectified or crushed, and you were just crushed in one of the most cruel ways. George Kittle has the off night that you needed. Everything's going your way. The 49ers are lining up for a 42-yard field goal that should basically clinch the game, not only for themselves, but for your fantasy team. If he makes that field goal, there's almost no chance that you would have lost. And then what does Robbie Gould do? One of the best kickers in the league for the last 15 years. He absolutely pulls it left, just barely. A very uncharacteristic mistake for Robbie Gould. And that was the difference between you winning and losing. At this point, with a record that is looking worse and worse every week, you're now at 1-3. Even with DeAndre Hopkins coming back to save what has been a very disastrous season for you at the wide receiver position, you may already be in too deep of a hole to really get out of at this point. Your running backs are still good. Damian Harris, Austin Eckler, and James Conner. I like all of those guys pretty well in a 14-team league. Pittman didn't have a great week, and Gabe Davis, we thought that that Thursday night game early in the season was a coming out party for Gabe Davis, but he has just not gotten any momentum going since then. He had that injury, and then he has just come back with 2 straight nothing performances for you. Your scoring ranking is 12th. I'm sorry. I liked your draft. I still think it could have worked out for you, but things have just not gone right, and now you are languishing in the cellar of the league, along with Pablo and some of the other teams like JoJo. So when you're talking about this, Sean, it's kind of getting into better luck next year. You may want to invest next year a little bit more in your tight end. That's another issue with your team. With all that being said, Sean, we are going to be moving on from your team now into the top 10. Not that being top 10 in a 14-team league is impressive, but it's a top 10 nonetheless. Number 10 right now. Coming in at the number 10 spot in our power rankings, it is Character Concerns FC. At this point, the running joke is changing the first word in your team name. This week, the theme is Running Back Concerns FC, with Cordero Patterson on injured reserve, one of the lone bright spots on an otherwise pretty lackluster roster. Patterson is now on injured reserve, and you are left with a hodgepodge of pretty bad running backs. I know you recently made a trade to try and rectify this issue. That will come up in next week's power rankings after we see a little bit more from what those guys can do. But your key gamble this week was to put Marcus Mariota, the Oregon Duck product. You took a gamble on Mariota, just as the Titans did many years ago, and just like the Titans, you were burned. You were burned by Mariota. He absolutely shit himself. I believe he was the worst quarterback in the National Football League this week, and certainly he was in the fantasy football perspective with 3.7 points. If you had played Kirk Cousins, even with the dog shit performance he had, you would have won. That being said, there's a lot of reason to think this might be a little bit of a fluky performance by your team. A lot of reason. 35.9 points from TJ Hawkinson. Cody Barton isn't going to be there every week to tap him on the shoulder as he runs up the sideline in one of the most pathetic displays of defense that I have ever seen in the National Football League. And also Greg Joseph with 17 points at kicker. That is going to be extremely rare. You had some good performances. Tyreek, obviously huge. Jamar did pretty well. Ramondre was all looking good for you until Mariota shit his pants. And Mike Evans absolutely goes off on Sunday Night Football to just rip a victory that you probably thought you had right out from you. Ajit, it's been tough, it's been rough, but you're at 1-3 now, and it's going to be very difficult, especially with your injury situation, to come back from that. So with that being said, Ajit, you are very close to better luck next year territory. We will see if you can somehow rectify this disaster. With all that being said, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to continue to move on. It's going to be number 9 in the power rankings, and it's going to be coming at you right now. Moving on to the number 9 spot in our power rankings. Coming out of the dumpster, we have rankings as bad as Jimmy. Ouch. Kind of a personal attack there on me, Lester. And it's funny because I don't remember my power rankings missing wide open receivers down the sideline at all this season, which is more than I can say for Mr. Garoppolo, who continues to make that a weekly tradition. See Charlie Warner last night. Moving on, though, to your team. Definitely a bounce-back win. JoJo let you off the hook a little bit with that Rashad Penny disaster. When you look at your team, it looked like there could possibly be a comeback in the making with JoJo's team, and then Leonard Fournette just big-time uppercut to really pull away there at the end and get the job done. Fournette has been solid. Miles Sanders, not expecting him to go off like this very much, but he did it this week, so good for you. Now, it's really, really devastating for me to see Richie James in any fantasy football lineup. That is almost an affront to our league. I'm offended, actually, personally, by that. He had a negative 0.6 performance due to a fumble he had on special teams because he's a kick returner. So why you're starting him at wide receiver when you have Adam Thielen and Michael Gallup, who are clearly better players, on your bench, or even Tyler Algier, who's now going to be a factor in the Atlanta Falcons offense. I don't know why you're playing Richie James. Please, for my sake, never do that again. I'm triggered. I need to be in a safe space right now just looking at Richie fucking James. A guy, of course, a former 49er, and a guy I like as a kick returner, not a good receiver. Other than that, good job by you, good performance. Not too many things crazy. I will say one note. Daniel Carlson, number 2 kicker in fantasy right now. Your rate is homering. Actually worked out this time. With all that being said, we are going to move on to the number 8 team in our power rankings. Number 8 right now. Gentlemen, moving on to the number 8 spot in our league, we have Jungle Fever, formerly known as Scoreless in Seattle, although after this weekend in Detroit, that name may no longer be very applicable because Geno Smith was looking like he was back at West Virginia this weekend, so congratulations to y'all on that epic win. But when you look at this fantasy football team here with Chris Hasenheier, you know, he's a 3-1 team, so you look at the record and you go, that's pretty good. But his scoring rank is 11th in the league this year. So really, if he had maybe lost an extra game or he was 2-2 or 1-3, he'd probably be even lower on this list than he is right now. He gets a little bit of a benefit of the doubt. He had one really good week where he went off, but he's had 3 pretty dismal weeks. He's been sliding by. He may have somehow captured the spirit of Mr. Lautenschlager by having this happen, but it wasn't going to happen this week. Gabo did not let him off the hook. When you look at this team, Rodgers, a bit of a concern, has yet to have a breakout game this year. Johnny Taylor, where the hell was that guy this week? 2.8 points. He had a fumble. Brutal. Marquise Brown, at least he is finally kind of asserting himself as a great receiver, but overall lots of issues. With Keenan Allen out, you are kind of in this limbo period where your flex position is vulnerable to underperforming, which it did this week with Craig Reynolds, which is truly one of the more desperate plays you're going to see in fantasy football this year. Not great. So, Chris, I tried to give you credit last week. Apparently, you were complaining about your ranking, pal. Hey, I ranked you pretty high for a team that is now 11th in the scoring rankings. You are in danger of, with another loss and another bad performance, slipping down into the double digits and potentially getting into whiff distance of that dumpster, although it looks like Pablo has basically just pitched a tent in there and has decided he's going to live there for the entire season. With all that being said, folks, we are moving now to the middle of the pack, and number 7 is coming up right now. All right, gentlemen, It is time for the number 7 team in the power rankings. Third time returning champion to the number 7 spot. It is Jake Smith with Double D Cup. Jake, you are about as average as it gets. You have been 7th in the power rankings for now the 3rd straight week. You are 7th in the scoring rankings. You're just really a complete middle-of-the-road fantasy football team. It's nice, of all the teams that have been so inconsistent this year, your team has been a modicum of consistency and a modicum of mediocrity. You're 2-2. Everything about your team is average. Joe Burrow, good, solid quarterback. I'm still liking this Barkley pick. And then Dobbins kind of showed you a little bit, as well as did Cup this week. Your main areas of concern is you had, once again, a complete disaster at flex. It was a new player, but the same result, 0.9 points from McCole Hardman. He didn't do anything. The good news, of course, for you is that Chris Godwin seems to be back now. He is going to be looking very good in that flex spot as opposed to the typical bullshit that you've been having in there so far this season. Your flex has been poor, but a lot of the other factions of your team have been very good. Terry McLaurin is another guy that's been kind of iffy. Not really his fault. Carson Wentz has just been a dumpster fire this year. Jake, you are super average, and don't think that's a bad thing, okay? If you're average, that means there's 49% of the people are below you, so that's still pretty good. With that being said, we are going to move on to the top 6 of this week. Coming in at number 6, find out right now. All right, guys, it is now the top half of the league. Coming in at number 6 and returning to the team spot in the preseason power rankings, we have, of course, the Best Team Revenge Tour. And oh, how sweet that revenge was this week in one of the most classic battles. A battle of 2 teams that were in a completely different stratosphere than the rest of the league, blowing the competition away. By all rights, Brendan and I should have both had wins this week, but only one team could prevail. And for most of Sunday afternoon, Sunday night, and then Monday night, it looked as though Brendan had me beat. Things started getting out of control. A dropped interception in the end zone leads to a field goal for his kicker, and you're thinking that's too much of a swing to overcome. And then, as Stafford drops back on a screen pass, he emerges, the hero of the hour, Talanoa Hufanga, with the interception, return for a touchdown, completely changed my season. We may be looking back at this, folks, and saying this was the moment that changed the fantasy football landscape for the entire season. An instant swing from 1-3 to 2-2. Got me to 150 points this week. An incredible performance that definitely deserved the win. I'm so happy. I really like the way my team is looking right now. We had, 5 players get 20-plus points. That is always going to be a good sign. That was 100 points just right there, let alone what everyone else did. One area of concern, Kyle Pitts. Why are they not throwing him the ball? Mariota only completed 7 passes in the entire game. In a Falcons win, that was pretty absurd, of course. Brendan, I'm sorry. I tried to make it up to you by ranking you ahead of me in this power rankings because your team is very good, but I am absolutely stoked. Frankly, I needed this win more than you do. But hey, you're going to get a consolation prize coming up next. Number 5 in the league is coming up right now. All right, folks, coming in at number 5, it is a role reversal from our matchup this week. It is Big Beat Manifesto, Brendan Costello. Brendan, you are at number 5 ahead of me, even though I beat you, because after this week, you have the number 1 scoring team in fantasy football. You have had a very good season, and this week just absolutely took it to a whole new level. Josh Jacobs, can we start with there? Are the Raiders finally going to just accept that Josh Jacobs is their best running back and that they have to run the ball to be successful? If they truly do accept that and feed Josh Jacobs the ball, your entire season outlook could change. 32 points, just ramming the ball over and over and over again. Not just getting carries, but also pass receptions as well. Absolutely terrific performance. Tom Brady finally gets going, has his signature game of the season with 25 points. Joe Mixon, solid as ever. DK Metcalf, are the Seahawks going to be able to get him the ball this consistently? Well, for the last 2 weeks, it looks like they have finally cracked the code to getting their best player the ball a lot. And then another great storyline for your team, of course, is the fact that in spite of Diggs not having his best game, a team that was looking a little bit one-dimensional with Diggs early on, he doesn't have a great game, but you still put up 142.7 points. That is the second highest total of the entire season, and yet you did not come away with a victory. I hope this ranking makes it up to you, Brendan. Hey, I wish it could have happened another way. I wish I could have been playing somebody else this week. I would have loved to have beaten Nibs or Gabo or one of the top teams this week instead of you, but it just had to be this way. And now here we are. You're sitting here at 2-2. I'm 2-2, vying kind of for that first, last one in, first one out playoff spot. So you and me is going to be a dogfight, I think, for the most of the season. We'll see how it turns out. But hey, you're a top 5 team in fantasy this week. You should be proud of that. Now, with that being said, we are moving on. It is number 4 time coming up right now. All right, gentlemen, it is time for the number 4 team in our power rankings. And at number 4, we have, let me get this right, Solly's week pullout game. Last week it was Rainforest Cafe bathroom. Looks like I'm starting to detect a theme here. The personal attacks from Gabo are coming out. That is so out of character for him. I would never expect him to immaturely call out everybody's sexual lives or other personal information about them. But Gabo apparently has chosen to do that. But hey, you know what? He got a win this week, so he doesn't get the penalty. He backed it up with a win, even though he basically took advantage of Chris's shit pile of a performance. But hey, you know, we don't analyze too much, you know, how the sausage is made. Just appreciate another win in the win column. When you look at Gabo's team, the biggest storyline clearly is the loss of Javonte Williams. Now, in a official league statement, a.k.a. his text message to me a couple days ago, he has professed confidence that Melvin Gordon will be able to fill in the shoes of Javonte Williams. I, frankly, am less optimistic. I could see this turning around. His revolving door at wide receiver has been effective, but is it sustainable? Obviously, the human Dortch didn't really do anything last week. With Amon-Ra St. Brown, you are once again relying on Tyler Lockett, who has been a little bit better than I expected him to be, but there's still question marks there. Overall, though, your team looks good. Russell Wilson finally had a decent game. Chubb has continued to be solid. So there's a lot to be excited about with this team. One thing is the year of the disappointing tight end has continued. Kyle Pitts, George Kittle, and Darren Waller all struggling a lot this year. Gabo, you and I are both victims of that disappointing tight end group. So hopefully things turn around for us, or at least definitely for me. I don't really care as much about you, but hopefully it definitely turns around for me. With that being said, folks, we are going to be moving on to the number 3 team in the power rankings coming at you right now. Gentlemen, we are moving on to the number 3 team in the league power rankings, and we have here at number 3, Gimme More, the only guy besides myself with a consistent team name, along with, of course, JoJo and Pablo, but frankly, those guys barely even count as teams at this point. With Gimme More, we have a classic case of a preseason dark horse now emerging as a legit contender. With Boston's lineup, the theme has mostly been the same. Those top 3 names that you see, Josh Allen, Christian McCaffrey, Clyde Edwards-Helaire, those guys have been carrying the big stick for this team all season, and they did it again this week. Slow week from Kirk and James Robinson, but you got just enough points to scrape by a Sean Bates team that had victory right there in his hand and just let it slip away on that Monday Night Football disappointment. I don't expect many slow games from James Robinson, probably just an outlier against that Philly Eagles football team that has been excellent this season. But everything else looks pretty good. Even DJ Moore, who's been frankly ass this entire season, finally had a somewhat mediocre performance. But you are also in that tight end bust bubble with George Kittle, who just hasn't really gotten it going yet this season at all, hasn't been healthy, hasn't gotten a lot of looks. Garoppolo hasn't really thrown it to him that much, and the 49ers passing offense in general, with the exception of Deebo Samuel, has been extremely slow this entire season. With that being said, Boston, you know, your team has established itself and really entrenched itself as a contender with a 3-1 record and remarkably second in the point standings. Last week you were number 1. Brendan overtook you there, but you're still right up there at the tippy top. So congratulations on that, Boston. All right, we're going to be moving on. It's top 2 time. Another consistent top 2 coming up right now. Here we go. All right, gentlemen. Number 2 in the power rankings, we have Sydney, Abel's best friend, formerly known as I'm Sorry, Miss Jackson. Nate, I got to be honest. This is just the nice guy in you coming out, okay? This is not that sick of a burn compared to what Gabo did on you. Not saying that Gabo is some sort of genius or anything. I would never, ever say that. But in terms of your team name, it's not that much of a hard-hitting name at all. But what has been hard-hitting is your lineup consistently this season. When you look at this team, you're 3rd in the league in the point standings. You're actually ahead of Nibs slightly in terms of points per game. And even though Lamar Jackson had a very slow week by his standards, you still managed to put up the 3rd highest total in points this season in a classic comeback against Ajit. Primetime Mike Evans with a big game. Derrick Henry back to his former self, it would seem. And, A.J. Dillon still very solid. Brandon Cooks came through when he needed him to. So a lot of reason to think that your team is going to be able to continue to sustain the success that you've been having. Success in that context, contradicting your pullout game success, which according to Gabo's team name is very bad. But hey, if that means we got a new Solly coming into the world, I'm all about it. Hey, you and Morgan are the type of people that should be mating, good solid citizens. Some of these other people, not so sure, man. Not so sure. But anyway, I digress. We are moving on. It's number 1 time, folks, coming up right now. All right, members of the league, it is now time for the number 1 team in our power rankings. And of course, as I stated, with another victory, moving to 4-0, we have the Niners. D sucks. I'm sorry, my friend. That team name fails to troll me. It falls flat in the face of not only a fantasy victory, but also a real-life victory as well, in which the Niners defense proved it could potentially be the league's best unit on defense and possibly the best 49ers defensive unit in a while. But when I look at your team, I see a collection of delicious ingredients that would potentially even rival this delicious Chipotle burrito. Look at all that quality right there. Let's take a taste of victory, folks. That new steak is great. And so is your team, my friend. Quarterback, nailed. You've got a top wide receiver. You've got options, depth at receiver with Cortland Sutton, CeeDee Lamb, Drake London when he plays well, Pat Freiermuth, sick tight end, DeAndre Swift waiting to come back and be that elite scorer that you drafted him to be. Your team should be getting better, not worse, in the coming weeks. I like this roster a lot. I think your team is very good. That is what it's all about, my friend. You retain your spot at number 1. Hope you enjoy it. Obviously, you and me are playing in 2 weeks. I know that both of us are going to be looking forward to that one. Potentially could be the matchup of the season when it happens. That all being said, that is where the power rankings are going to end. This has been another fantastic week of football. It's been so great to enjoy this season with you guys. I'm going to continue to push these videos out and do them on a consistent basis on Wednesdays. So you guys should be able to anticipate on Wednesdays that this video is going to be uploaded and viewable for all to you enjoy. That being said, nothing more to say. Hope you all are doing well. Stay safe out there, and I'll see you next week.